Everdark, Episode 97, Dress Up. Last on Everdark, Christian realizes that since Callie can move from one body to the next, that locating him won't necessarily lead them to the Harrows. Instead, he realizes that his gift as speaker to the dead could allow him to hear the Harrows' thoughts and locate where they are. But the only one that can truly help him do this is Caemorn. He and Fiona teleport back to the Spire to bargain with Caemorn. The Callie vampire agrees to help, but he claims that they must let him out of his cell and they need to go deep into the Everdark to the Well of All Souls, where few have ever gone and fewer have returned. Julian shifted restlessly as Rajani and the other members of House Winter speculated on who they believed Callie inhabited.
We have sent out spies to the cities where the listeners have heard Callie's voice. We have not always been successful in identifying the body it was coming from.
I would imagine Callie is an old hand at spotting Iros vampires and cloaking his thoughts, Balthazar said with a frown. You do realize that he could be onto you, don't you? If a House Winter vampire always seems to show up where he is, he's going to get a clue. Rajani smiled a little tightly at that.
We are not obvious.
You mean you don't show up in your Jedi robes? There was a twinkle of amusement in Balthazar's eyes. There was the slightest bit of color in Rajani's cheeks, but she smiled.
No, these are our formal garments.
So, Damon, we ranked their best attire. Balthazar really was grinning now. Damon smiled back, but Julian knew his master sensed his restlessness. It wasn't that he didn't understand how important this all was, but it wouldn't lead directly to his parents. Christian had the right idea, that listening for his parents' voices would be the best.
How long will it take Christian to learn that, though? Callie could do anything to my parents before then.
Julian's hands tightened into fists. Damon stroked his back. They will be well. Callie will not destroy any advantage she has over us. Damon said quietly. Julian looked up into the Vampire King's beautiful face.
But he could hurt them.
No, Damon said with a shake of his head. Callie might have little regard for life and death of those around him, but he is no sadist. There is no reason for him to hurt them at this time.
At this time?
Julian dug his fingernails into his palms.
If he figures out what we're doing, then...
You must not let your mind travel these paths. It is unproductive, and it gives Callie power over you he does not deserve, Damon counseled. As the Vampire King spoke, he continued to soothe Julian with gentle touches. Julian was aware of each and every one of them. He was surprised at how important it was to him, even though they could speak without moving their lips, to have Damon touch him. He'd never wanted his lovers in the past to be so close.
Another part of being a fledgling?
Julian wondered. You fear what a fledgling wants is unnatural. Damon lifted an eyebrow.
It makes me feel animalistic.
Julian admitted with a shrug. And humans are not animals? The lilt of amusement in Damon's voice was more than evident. Humans seem to spend a lot of time denying what they are.
We're complicated that way.
Julian smiled. Unnecessarily so. Damon grinned.
If you're going to rule over humanity, you have to understand our complexities, our foibles, our stupidities, all of that.
Julian reminded him. You are right, Damon answered with a nod. I wish to learn some more about humans. I want you to take me someplace where I might be schooled some more in them. Julian bit his lower lip. He'd taken Damon to a bunch of bars already, so it would seem redundant to bring him to another. Taking him to a restaurant seemed foolish, as neither of them needed to eat human food in any event. Besides, if it was just them at a table together, Damon wouldn't be interacting with anyone but him and the waiter. Go to the movies? He tried to imagine Damon watching men and women in spandex fight another with fake superpowers. Damon might wonder where these challenging humans were, and then be disappointed to find out they didn't exist. It was too warm for ice skating. Bowling? That could be fun. He imagined that Damon would bowl a perfect game, But again, while they might interact with the guy or gal who rented them the shoes or the bartender, they wouldn't be truly getting to know people like Damon had asked. Just then, he focused back in on the conversation.
We suspect that the mayor may have had contact with Callie. One of our people is headed to a gala at the museum tonight where—
That's perfect!
Julian practically shouted. His cheeks colored when everyone stared at him in confusion. He looked at Balthazar.
We should go to that gala. Damon, you'd love to go to a gala, wouldn't you?
Would I? A smile twitched at the Vampire King's lips.
Okay, so they are stuffy with lots of rich and powerful people who are donating to a good cause, but somehow are just there to be seen as important.
Julian admitted.
My parents used to be invited to them all the time. Television personalities, you know. Politicians are sort of like ugly actors.
it is true.
Rajani admitted with a smile.
Though if they were too good-looking, people might not take them seriously.
Double-edged sword.
Julian grinned.
I used to hate these things when I was a kid. My mom thought it was cute to put a bow tie on me, and what are you smiling at, Balthazar?
Imagining how cute you must have been in a bow tie, that's all. Balthazar chuckled.
Yeah, well, you're not getting me in one again.
Julian scrubbed the back of his neck.
Anyways, Damon and I should go to the gala. It's not like we need tickets. We can just make them think we're invited.
I think we actually are invited.
Arceus was frowning.
I haven't been looking at the social calendar due to all the excitement.
After all that bowing and scraping, which you despise as much as me, I might add, Julian, Balthazar said, you want to go to a gala full of those odious—
Damon needs to meet more humans. He should definitely meet politicians.
Julian pointed out.
We can also scan the minds of the attendees for links to Callie.
That could be useful, but I think you have another reason for wanting to go.
Arceus smiled.
I get to move and do something. Besides, I love the museum, and it'll be nice to tour the exhibits after dark.
Julian said with a shrug. And it will keep your mind off other things, Damon said with a squeeze of his shoulder.
It will. And I'm looking forward to seeing how you do with more people.
Julian admitted. He wanted to enjoy this time with Damon without feeling heavy with guilt about his parents. This was, at least, doing something towards the cause. I believe this would be a good idea, Harrows, Damon said. I am eager to meet these local leaders. You won't be after you meet them, Balthazar quipped. But Julian is right. You need to see your possible allies or enemies. They would hardly qualify as enemies. They would just be the ignorant, Damon responded as he drew himself up. Right. You are king. Balthazar chuckled at that as well.
I thought the idea was we wanted to keep a low profile from where Callie might be.
Arceus pointed out. Callie will not know we are looking for them, if they are even there tonight, Damon explained. While Callie is suspicious, they are arrogant. They believe themselves smarter than everyone else. My hope is that they will want to see me. Rajani's brow furrowed as she clearly intuited something in Damon's tone.
You do not believe they would want to see you out of hatred, but love.
Callie is angry with me because I abandoned them. It's a hate of another color. Damon shrugged. Julian knew that he was not so sanguine about what Callie had done. Damon was actually furious, but he was compartmentalizing his feelings. The Vampire King was used to waiting like a spider in his web for things to align. I suppose it all makes sense. While we go to House Winter to await Fiona, Christian, and Caymorn, you get to go drink champagne and eat appetizers with all the utterly boring and vapid. Yet Balthazar's expression showed he would rather like to be going with them.
Seer, would you like to go as well?
Julian asked, but she waved him off.
No, my dear. I'm not quite ready for prime time.
You know that you can't go in those clothes, don't you? Balthazar pointed out. A little smile played over his lips. In fact, I think you may have to wear a bow tie again, Julian. It is a black tie event after all. Julian's mouth compressed for a moment, but then he imagined Damon in a tuxedo. Then he frowned. At this time of night, there was no way they could get such clothes tonight.
We didn't have any tuxedos made when we got measured,
Julian began, but Balthazar was looking at him with barely concealed amusement. You are joking, dear prince. You think I wouldn't have had formal wear made for you?
I'm taking it that you did?
Julian asked. I did, Balthazar pronounced.
I guess that's good then.
Julian made that sound too much like a question for Balthazar's taste, evidently, because he narrowed his eyes suspiciously at Julian. A man who didn't like a tux was suspect.
Wait a minute. That's why you're annoyed.
I'm what now? Balthazar's expression was all innocence.
You're not necessarily keen on the people at this gala, but you like dressing up.
Julian crowed. Balthazar's expression was strangely bland. I don't know what you mean.
You're right. He's a peacock.
Arceus grinned. Balthazar sat upright in his chair, practically quivering. Just because people in this day and age are casual to the extreme, that does not mean those of us who enjoy.
Frilly cuffs?
Julian guessed. Another narrow-eyed stare. More formal.
Boots and tights?
Julian teased. Attire does not make one.
Waistcoats and pocket watches?
Julian's face hurt from smiling this hard. Strange, Balthazar finished.
Not in the least.
Arceus smoothed his hands down his very stately, formal robes. Balthazar pinched the top of his nose. Now go get changed and have a terrible time as you are abandoning me. I shall have a car for you waiting out front when you're ready to leave.
Don't worry. Christian will be back with you in no time.
Julian promised.
I am surprised that they are not at House Winter already. There is no word of them being there,
Rajani said with a tilt of her head. Julian guessed she must be in mental contact with her house. Or maybe the cell phone hadn't rung.
But perhaps they are taking precautions when bringing him over to Earth,
Rajani suggested, but even she looked dubious.
They are likely negotiating with K-Morn still.
Arceus suggested.
I'm sure he's being far more amenable trying to get out of that cell than he would be at House Winter.
Balthazar frowned, as if he didn't quite believe that either. We should adjourn to House Winter while Damon and Julian scamper off. Come, Elgar, you're accompanying me. Yes, master, the quiet fledgling said to his skull. Julian turned to Damon as the other stood up to leave.
Let's head to the house and...
Between one blink and the next, they were in the guest house in their rooms before the huge walk-in closets. Julian blinked.
So handy,
he murmured. I should have let you practice that skill, Damon said, as he let go of Julian's hands and beelined to the 2 tuxedos that were hanging in clear garment bags at the end of the cedar poles. Julian's eyes widened as he really took in all of the clothes that Balthazar had made for them. Some of his own were there too, old familiar favorites that he fingered as he walked past them. He dressed practically, because of his profession, but almost every piece of clothing that had survived one of his and Christian's adventures had a story to go along with it. Tell me one of them, Damon suggested as he opened the garment bags.
Okay.
Julian grinned, happy to talk about his adventures with Damon, and even a little more excited to have some with Christian and Damon next time.
And Balthazar and Elgar, too. Hell, I bet Arceus and Fiona would be down as well. Though Balthazar seems the type to sit back in fully clean clothes and supervise our adventures from afar.
Julian laid a hand on top of a faded green t-shirt that was neatly folded in one of the glass-topped drawers.
This one I wore in France. Christian and I had heard of this cult outside of this small French village in the countryside who worshipped something in the woods that had horns and no eyes.
Julian told him, quickly warming up to his story.
We arrived in this town and immediately knew that something was up. The people were not exactly hostile to us, even though we spoke terrible French and were Americans and had cameras. No, nothing to do with that. Well, maybe the cameras they had a problem with. They just didn't like outsiders, and that meant anyone who wasn't a citizen of that town.
Really? What were they hiding? Damon asked as he laid out the various pieces of the tailored tuxedo and examined the craftsmanship. Satisfied that it was acceptable, he started to take off his shirt.
Well, it appeared we actually arrived a few days before a major holiday for them. I should really put the word holiday in quotes.
Julian pulled off his sweater and slipped on the tuxedo shirt while at the same time toeing off his boots. He saw that Balthazar had appropriate shoes for them too. What kind of holiday in quotes was this? Damon asked. Julian looked up and saw that Damon's chest was bare. In order to stay within YouTube community guidelines, the next section of the podcast has been edited. Do not worry. Damon ran his hands up and down Julian's arms. I did feed quite a bit in solace, and I will have far more tonight. Let us go.
Balthazar said he had a car outside for us.
Bah! I will not get into another coffin, Damon said with a shake of his head. And before Julian had a chance to respond, they were on the opposite side of the street from the museum. There were 3 sets of broad steps that led up to a domed central building. A red carpet was laid out, and the museum was awash in golden light. People in tuxedos and gowns streamed up from the sidewalk, where limousines dropped them off in a flurry of flashes as reporters took their photographs for the gossip columns and more respectable news. Julian actually found himself a little excited to see the museum with Damon. The Vampire King offered Julian his arm. Come, Julian, let us meet my future subjects. Julian shook his head with an amused laugh, even as he took Damon's arm, and they headed across the street. Join us next time for episode 98, Weapon of Choice. My dearest acolytes, I regret to inform you that this particular platform's Inquisition has decided that sexy vampire interludes are not within the bounds of community guidelines. Therefore, this episode has been cut to be acceptable to audiences of all ages. Not to worry. If you are interested in hearing the full episode, with all of the steamy parts included, you can purchase a monthly membership at wraithrain.com. Not ready to commit to a monthly membership? Then please visit the shop at wraithrain.com, where the full episodes are available for sale in audiobook format. I wonder just what it is that the community is afraid of hearing. Perhaps something they'd like. The community protest too much, methinks.